I'm joined now by two legal experts to discuss the draft decision and where the court might go from here. Neil Katyal is a former acting U.S. Solicitor General. He clerked for Stephen Breyer and has argued 45 cases before the court. And Jenn Mascott is an assistant law professor at George Mason University. She's clerked for both Kavanaugh and Clarence Thomas. I should make the note for Kavanaugh, it was at the circuit level, if I have that right. Welcome to both of you. Hopefully you can take us inside the court here a little bit. The leak decision was not the first leak. There was a first leak, and it was a few days before Wall Street Journal editorial board. I want to note a little something here, Neil. The oral argument suggested that 5 justices lean toward doing so, but a ferocious lobbying campaign is trying to change their minds. The particular targets are Justice Barrett and Brett Kavanaugh. Within 5 days, this editorial would go on to speculate correctly that Alito was writing the majority opinion. It appears there is a debate happening in the court. Take us inside the court. When you read this, you put it together, what's going on?
Yeah, so I think that the leak that came this week from Politico is the more extreme one because we actually see the draft opinion, something that, to my knowledge, has never happened. So the process is there was an oral argument in December. The justices all voted in a conference. Nobody else was allowed into that conference. They take a tentative vote. The senior-most justice then assigns the opinion to herself, himself, or whomever. Here it looks like it was assigned to Alito. And then that draft was circulated in February for comment by the other justices. It's of course possible that votes change. That sometimes happens, but it's extremely rare. So what this decision says, and you started with stare decisis, it's so important because this draft decision says they're going to overrule Roe versus Wade, overrule Planned Parenthood versus Casey. It's as extreme an opinion, Chuck, as you could imagine. It looks like it was written by Robert Bork, the failed Supreme Court nominee.
Jennifer, you've clerked for Brett Kavanaugh on the circuit. Do you sense that he's waiting to see what the Chief Justice, who may be writing another opinion, that seems to be the speculation, that would preserve Roe and allow maybe a new definition of viability? Do you sense that that is something he's open to?
Well, first, let me just join you both in saying I think the leak this week was unprecedented. It's outrage. I mean, the Supreme Court's a very collegial institution. The justices across the 9 chambers work in a lot of trust and confidence with each other, and I think are trying to neutrally apply the rule of law. And I think it's actually quite breathtaking how detailed and well-reasoned and thorough this opinion was as of February. And so I think what Justice Kavanaugh and the rest of the justices will be doing is applying the Constitution as they understand it and are not going to allow themselves to be bullied or intimidated by this outrageous leak this week. All right,
but going back to whether Kavanaugh is weighing the precedent issue here, did Susan Collins only hear what she wanted to in that statement from Brett Kavanaugh?
Well, I think what this draft opinion makes very clear is that the court itself has never been able, after all these decades, to settle on what justification would uphold the reasoning in Roe. In fact, that decision's been divisive and criticized from the day that it came down. And so I think the justices are looking at the text of the Constitution and recognizing that perhaps the court has had a hard time settling on a justification because there's just no right in the Constitution on this complicated moral issue that more properly belongs with the American people.
Neil, when you read Alito's opinion, did you say to yourself, would it change how you might have defended Roe or argued it in the first place?
I totally disagree with my friend Jennifer. There was nothing persuasive in that draft whatsoever. Roe was, of course, a contentious decision. But it was decided by a 7-2 majority of the court. 5 of those 7 were Republican-appointed justices. And the Supreme Court in 1992 sailed well past Jennifer's point. They said even if Roe might have different theoretical bases, privacy, equal protection, whatever, it's now the law of the land. The court's credibility is staked on it being the law of the land. Social expectations have crystallized around it. So for them to overrule this, Chuck, which is the super precedent of super precedents, calls every other precedent into question, from gay marriage to contraception, as you were talking about before with the Mississippi governor.
I want to ask actually about because in the draft opinion, Alito tries to say, hey, I don't want this to be used for anything else because privacy has been used for contraception, privacy has been used to justify same-sex marriage. Just because you say it doesn't mean it's true.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, we learned this with Bush v. Gore. So why shouldn't folks who are in same-sex marriages why Why shouldn't they be nervous right now?
Unfortunately, I think they have to be nervous right now. It's the rationale that the court, that Justice Alito used in the draft opinion. If that draft opinion rationale stays the law of the land, it says basically the right has to be historically rooted in the deep traditions of the people. That is not, I think, a test that gay marriage would meet if you have that kind of, really harsh reading. And it does reflect a, underlying conception that some justices on this court, pretend to be talking about the original intent of the Constitution, and they are anything but when it comes to striking down the Voting Rights Act. They make up the doctrine when they call corporations people. They make up the doctrine. It's not in the text of the Constitution.
Jennifer, why should folks who are in same-sex marriages be comforted by what Alito wrote in the draft opinion?
Chuck, with respect, Neil, I think here is just flat wrong. And I think President Biden's remarks just this week show why. Even he acknowledged that we've got complicated questions here involving a child that makes this case fundamentally different from any other issue. We have another human life at issue. These are complicated questions the American people feel strongly about. And the language that Neil's quoting, deeply rooted, comes from a 1997 opinion that itself was quoting opinions back to the 1930s. This is nothing new. This is an unprecedented issue, unique of its kind. And I think it's quite telling that the instant this draft was leaked, people started talking about other questions, not this one, as if this opinion itself really is not all that objectionable.
You don't believe that this is getting rid of a right to privacy, that basically is saying there's no right to privacy in the Constitution?
I don't think that this opinion says that more generally, because it's focused on the right of and interest of the child. And essentially here, the court is actually doing an admirable thing, I think, in the draft opinion, and taking itself out of the seat of power and leaving decisions up to the American people.
Neil, where does this go? Does the Supreme Court going to hear more abortion cases, assuming they do overturn Roe for now in perpetuity?
I think they will. And the idea that this draft is going to return things to the people, I think, is just ludicrous. I mean, I'd feel a lot better if the Republican Party wasn't a party built on basically keeping the voters away from the polls and the like. You can't preach the language of democracy on Monday and then on the other 6 days of the week try and take it away from the American people. And so, yes, Chuck, I think whatever the court does here, there's going to be abortion case after abortion case. Your guests just a moment ago discussed things like contraception. Right. Louisiana's banning IUDs and the like. So absolutely, they're in the thick of it.
All right, I literally have to go. Do you expect this opinion to change much from the draft opinion?
Not at all. I respect the justices. They will not be intimidated.
And what do you expect?
I can't predict that one at all. This is unprecedented.
You think it's possible they rehear the case, don't you?
Oh, I do. I think they could rehear the case, and I also would never count the Chief Justice out. His vote didn't matter in December, but it might matter now.
Rehearing would be a disaster.
Neil Katyal, Jennifer Mascott, thank you both for being here. I appreciate it.